Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Donald Trump, Commander-in-Chief. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As we reported last week, the president's job approval numbers are likely to go up because he took strong action against Syria after the tyrant Assad gassed his own people. Right off the bat, Mr. Trump went up 3% in a new CBS News poll. That is likely to rise even further this week. When CBS asked, do you approve or disapprove of the U.S. launching missiles against Syria, 57% approve, 36% disapprove, 8% don't know. Do you have confidence in Donald Trump's ability to handle the situation in Syria? 41% confident, 54% not confident. Finally, do you think it's necessary for Congress to approve any further U.S. action in Syria? Whopping 69% say it is, that Congress should get involved. 25% do not feel it's necessary. There are a number of developments on the military front this evening. U.S. warships are heading toward the Korean Peninsula because the nutty dictator of that country continues to test ballistic missiles in violation of international law. Also, 2 warships in the eastern Mediterranean continue to monitor Syria. There's also an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, the George H.W. Bush. So you can see that President Trump and the Pentagon are sending signals that if world order is threatened, America may respond. It's just a damn shame we're the only country willing to take that stand. There's no reason for Russia to prop up Assad in Syria. The man's a war criminal. Also, China does not try to control the North Korean situation when it absolutely could. Staunch allies like Britain, Australia, Canada, and France do help us out, but it's on a limited basis. Unfortunately, policing the world falls to America with all the danger and expense that entails. President Trump would be wise to pick his spots. The attack on Syria worked and was approved by most in the world who care about protecting innocent people. Yes, Russia and Iran are now threatening the USA, but so what? Those countries are thrown in with the devil, and we cannot back away from their bluster. However, a confrontation with Russia is not what anybody wants or needs. So President Trump would be wise to talk to Putin quietly, try to get the guy to wise up, perhaps by helping his economy. Iran, truly a hopeless situation, but the mullahs don't want to commit suicide. How the nuke treaty will eventually play out is one of the great mysteries. It is likely that North Korea will be the next problem we have to deal with. If they test a nuclear device, again in violation of international law, something will have to be done. Can Donald Trump convince the Chinese to partner up with us against North Korea? That would end the problem and be good for world order and for business. Again, it's a mystery why the Chinese will not exert their strength and influence on North Korea. Summing up, President Trump gained a measure of respect for his actions against Syria. U.S. military is gearing up, but caution should be the word. And that's the memo. Now for the top story reaction, joining us from Washington, Charles Crowder. So is President Trump doing better in your eyes?
Well, I'm sure I was not the only one who was surprised. After all, this is a man who campaigned on precisely not being the policeman of the world. He's a man who campaigned on America first. He said that the people around the world were bleeding us dry, mocking us. And here he was even talking about allies. Just a week before the strike, he said in his speech, I'm not president of the world, I'm president of the United States. And just 3 days before the attack, his own Secretary of State and UN ambassador essentially said we're willing to live with Assad. The idea of getting rid of him is off the table. Given all that, it was surprising and gratifying that Trump took the measure he did, and he essentially undermined and contradicted the entire idea, the one that was sort of the main theme of his inaugural address, that we were not the policemen of the world. We were not going to be acting on behalf of others. We were only going to be looking after ourselves. And the world needs us. They needed that strike, and they needed the message. This is not going to alter the course of the war in Syria, but it was a message to Russia, a message to China, and most importantly to North Korea, that the days of walking all over the U.S. and 8 years under Obama, knowing that the U.S. will do nothing, those days are over. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to do anything in the future, but it certainly says do not count on the passivity that you've seen for the last 8 years.
I think that answer was 75 minutes long, but from what I took of it, your opinion of Donald Trump has risen.
Were you taking?
Okay.
Were you taking notes? I hope you were.
Because
when I go long, I know
I have
you
a
can
very
get confused sometimes.
Very, very sophisticated mind, and I kind of understood what you said. Not all of it, but nobody could possibly understand all of it. Now, you have a situation where I don't think Trump contradicted himself. I don't think he's making himself in America the policeman of the world. This is a war crime situation. There's a difference between Assad, who's going to sit there. We're not going to remove him unless he does it again. Then maybe all bets will be off. But when you commit a war crime that harkens back to pre-World War II days, and when you do something that heinous, there's only one country in the world, Charles, only one, that's us, that's going to do something about it. And I think that the president stepped up and said, I'm not going to tolerate war crimes. I think that's what this is about.
But that's precisely being policeman of the world.
No, it's not. No, policeman of the world is basically regime change, occupation. You know, if a felony is committed, you go in. This wasn't a felony. This was way beyond that.
What you're saying is a crime against humanity was committed.
Right.
It was not an attack on the U.S. It was not a threat to the United States.
But it was in a way.
We stepped in.
Poison gas is allowed to be used.
Come on, you know.
No.
You know it's not.
If poison gas is allowed to be used without punishment, it will spread. And now we have a North Korean situation, which is absolutely a danger to the United States. If they're going to do a nuke test, an underground nuke test, I mean, they're basically saying we're going to do what we want, and if someday we want to launch this nuke at somebody else, we'll do that too. But I want to get into China.
But that's why I think...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, China.
Well, look, I think what you said about China, that it's a mystery why they're not reining in the North Koreans, it's not a mystery at all. China sees North Korea, number one, as very useful, a thorn in the side of the United States for 50 years. China's interest is to expand its influence in its periphery, meaning the Pacific Rim. It does not want us there. It's trying to drive us out. That's why it's doing all the construction on those islands. That's its objective. And we have been distracted, and we have been looking to the side.
But this draws
on account
us
of North Korea now.
You're making
for 50
two mistakes.
Years.
You're making two mistakes. Number one, China's main priority is business. They got 1.5 billion people in there, and the economy is not so good over there, okay? And this is bad for business, North Korea. Number two, they're drawing U.S. naval force in. North Korea is drawing it in. The last thing China wants. But the world order is something that China needs, because if that economy collapses in China, the government's going to. Last word.
Look, the Chinese calculation is if they help to bring down the North Korean regime, they are going to have a democratic, westernized South Korea all the way up to the border, probably with nuclear weapons, and that is the last thing they want. They now have a buffer state that's a client state that does. It acts as a buffer between.
Well, then keep
the West,
it, but make them behave.
South Korea.
Make them behave. Keep your little buffer.
How do you make a great power behave? You tell me.
Who's a great power? Not North Korea. They can barely feed their people. China can slap sanctions on them in a second that bring them to their knees. You know that.
But you have told us that for 30 years we have tried to get China to do exactly that, and we have not been able to.
I know.
And I just gave you the reasons why China is not interested in doing that.
Well,
it wants
now
to
they have U.S. warships
US.
On their coast because they're not interested. I don't know if that's the greatest strategy. Charles Krauthammer, everybody, there he is.
Warships.
And
they've had U.S. warships on their coast for 50 years.
All right, but now they're armed and dangerous. I got to tell everybody, before this segment, Charles Krauthammer fell asleep. I had to wake him up. I told him I was going to put a cat on his face.
True, right? All that's true, isn't it? True.